聴時間、登録者数、広告収入、この世のすべてを手に入れた YouTuber マッド D マイク。彼は誇り高き戦士のように自らを高く掲げ、死に向かって歩いていったのだ。処刑される前に彼が放った最後の言葉は、世界中の人々の冒険心をかきたてたのであった。
さあ、とっとと済ましちまおうぜ。
おい、レビューキング！秘密のビデオレビューはどこにやったんだ？やっぱり YouTube の中か！あんたは手に入れたんだろ？あの伝説のワンピースゲームのビデオレビューを from TV アニメーションワンピースグランドバトル
俺のビデオレビューか。欲しけりゃくれてやる。探せ。このビデオ内に隠された URL のすべての文字をそこに置いてきた。
This minigame tournament made me suspicious. This optional sequence of challenges is framed in a way where you select a crew and complete tasks of escalating difficulty, with failure at a game meaning you give up a member of the crew to the opposing team. Sounded familiar, and then I got to this minigame specifically, and my understanding about what I was actually playing was just turned upside down dramatically. If you're a fan of One Piece, you might see where I'm going with this, and if you're not, I'm going to do my best to explain. The now defunct 4Kids Entertainment was a television production company best known for licensing Japanese anime series and adapting them to be released in English. If you were a kid in the United States during the mid-2000s, you're sure to have seen series with their name stamped onto it, most famously brands like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, but perhaps most infamously, One Piece. The oft-times controversial, if not downright negative reputation that 4Kids had is in large part due to the quantity of the changes they made, which were sometimes the hard requirements demanded by broadcasting on American television networks, and other times the soft cultural demands of adapting TV series for American youth. One Piece arguably got hit the hardest with not only a slew of changes censoring anything nearing blood, sex, or PG-13 violence, but also the outright removal of certain characters and storylines. But I'm a ludophile first and foremost, so why I'm sharing this here is because of how it impacted the games. The 4Kids licensing of One Piece lasted a brief 2 years from 2004 to 2006, but you can feel the influence they left on the games released in this window. Most obviously is the use of 4Kids voice actors, but most disappointingly is the exclusion of any characters, levels, or references to material that 4Kids had not yet dubbed. All except for this minigame that tipped me off anyway. This minigame is parodying the Davy Back fight, a brief storyline in the anime that happens from around episode 210 to episode 225. 4Kids produced 104 episodes of the One Piece dub. The math is a little funky because they outright skipped a lot of material, so that 104th episode is sort of kind of equivalent to the 140s of the Japan release. But regardless of how you slice it, we're nearing about 100 episodes of difference between what Japan had and what America had, nearly half of the material for the show at the time. And it's this minigame here that caused me to do some research and discover an incredible plot twist. One Piece Grand Battle is the 4th entry in a long-running Japanese series, albeit a bastardized version of that 4th game. Aokiji is a playable character in the Japanese version, and that particularly threw me for a whirl because Aokiji and the Nintendo GameCube are just from 2 totally different eras in my mind, when in reality that's just because of how delayed One Piece material made it stateside. He was new and mysterious to the Japanese audiences in March of 2005 when they got Grand Battle 4. But English words would never leave Aokiji's lips until his American broadcast debut in October of 2013. He, and the many other characters introduced in the intervening episodes from the 140s to 220s that 4Kids never got to, were nixed from our American release. And I bring this to the attention at the beginning here because I don't want to harp on the differences too much. Grand Battle North America is more or less an objectively inferior product compared to its Japan equivalent, Grand Battle 4, otherwise known as Grand Battle Rush. But it's the version I grew up with and the one I wanted to return to for this video, and I'm fairly confident it's the version most of you have played as well. I'll be sure to give the Japanese series some videos of their own, but for now I want to enjoy Grand Battle for what it is, playing it independent of its Japanese equivalent. They made good on restoring some of the missing content in the eventual sequel Grand Adventure, but that too will get its own video. Let's get started.
One Piece! Grand Battle!
One Piece Grand Battle is awesome. The first thing I noticed when revisiting this one was just how well its art style has held up. The game was something to behold when it first came out, and it's still just as impressive today. It went for a more cartoony, almost chibi adaptation of the One Piece cast, but the characters themselves look really high quality. I spent 15 minutes skimming through the in-game model viewer to appreciate them, lots of fine details. But those details are far less important when you're in the midst of grand battling. The core of this title is one-on-one fights within a 3D arena. There are 2 face buttons dedicated to light and heavy attacks respectively, with each performing a string of up to 3 attacks. But you can weave the light and heavies between each other, so maybe you'll start a combo with a heavy and end with a light, or vice versa. Characters can also guard with a dedicated press of the right trigger, and that guard can be broken with a grab. Special moves can also be performed with character-specific button prompts. It's a pretty straightforward system overall, with I think one of its most defining features being the importance of vertical. Jumping has a minor tactical advantage. In addition to its innate benefits of getting you in the air and potentially overtaking obstacles, Grand Battle gives it a combat purpose by rewarding you for landing directly on top of your opponent's head. Not unlike a 3D platformer, you'll actually inflict damage if you land on your opponent, and as a bonus, a fruit will dislodge from them and be dropped onto the battlefield, which gives you more of your special meter if you pick it up. The introduction of benefits to aerial attacks meant that Grand Battle also had to introduce some punishes for that behavior, and it does that in 2 ways. The first is pretty straightforward. Each character in the roster specifically has a long-range aerial attack move designed to yoink a jump-happy opponent out of the air. The second comes into play with how items work. Items are randomly delivered inside of chests, barrels, and boxes, which can be picked up and thrown at enemies, but also gives your opponent the opportunity to catch and return fire. This is a holdover from previous entries in the series. Even the 2D PS1 fighters that Grand Battle started as had this as well. In the transition to 3D, Grand Battle allows crates to be stacked prior to throwing, as well as introducing a new throw button, the lob, which changes both the timing and the trajectory on the throw itself. This lob works great as an anti-air tool, but its change in the projectile speed also gives you another way to try to mind game your opponent and throw off the timing on their catch, hopefully rewarding them with a bonk on the head. And that's before you even get into whatever the contents of the containers are. The candies in this Grand Battle Piñata are a collection of explosives, poisons, power-ups, and all the different fruits that increase your special meter. The end result of all the boxes being thrown around, the showering of items within them, the jumping, the anti-jumping, and all the stage hazards trying to disrupt the action is pure chaos. Whimsical, absurdist chaos. The good kind. Don't take Grand Battle seriously. It doesn't want you to. It incentivizes jumping on your opponent's head and stacking mile-high columns of boxes to launch at them. It's just hard not to have fun. It feels like this silliness is built into the game at a systems level. If you had to take this game and reskin it with another property, I don't think it would really fit with most other shonen anime. I think it would probably be best adapted to be a Tom and Jerry or Popeye game, something slapstick and something cartoony, which, if you ask me, is a compliment, and I think series author Eiichiro Oda would find it to be a compliment as well, because One Piece itself is often slapstick and lowbrow, very intentionally so. The core fighting is good. There's a lot of variety in how you can dish out attacks, items and stage hazards introduce the appropriate amount of randomness for a party game, and there's a whole lot of good visuals to appreciate while you're doing it. But what is there in terms of other content? One Piece Grand Battle features 16 playable characters from the first 100 episodes of the anime. Non-playable characters make cameos as support characters, which act as summons that can be used mid-battle to harass your opponent. There are 7 stages overall, and they're far more than just window dressing because of the unique gimmicks that each one contains. Fuchsia Village has a rampaging cow that will knock over combatants, and lightning will strike Logtown, demanding that players jump over the bolt's discharge. In terms of modes, the offerings are pretty standard for a fighting game. The main single-player time sink is an arcade mode equivalent, where you can battle 6 AI opponents sequentially. There are brief dialogues between the characters, and an even briefer ending animation for each. Serviceable enough, but nothing you haven't seen before. The previously mentioned minigame mode is charming for a few runs. The minigames themselves are just the core fighting packaged in a few different ways and framed a little differently, like dealing a certain amount of damage within a time frame. There's some collectibles and doodads that you can accumulate the more time you spend with Grand Battle, so there's just a bit more incentive to repeat some of the modes over and over. It's really straightforward. A simple training mode and multiplayer tournament bracket round out the package, and again, it's no surprise that there are just more ways to experience that strong core gameplay. To me, that's all Grand Battle ever needs to be. It embraces the One Piece brand so well and is a game that has frantic cartoon fun down to its core, and it looks beautiful while doing it. I had a better time playing Grand Battle than any other One Piece game I've touched in the past decade, and that is a shame. If you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I'm not a massive fan of most of the modern One Piece games that I've covered, and I'm even less enthusiastic about the ones that I haven't. But Grand Battle proves that One Piece games aren't doomed to mediocrity. They were great, and hopefully one day they can be again. For all the different directions that One Piece games could possibly go in the future, I wouldn't complain if they returned to the Grand Battle series. Just give America the full game this time.